reintroduce my colleague, Sean Fraga, who is Assistant Professor of Environmental Studies and History at USC, and he is the Project Director of Booksnake. He's going to start his presentation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you all for being here this morning. It's wonderful to have you all back and to be starting a second day of conversations about these projects. I want to start by telling you a little bit about where Booksnake comes from, and then we'll get into what it does and why I'm excited about it. I trained as a historian, and a big part of my process during that training and now is being able to go to archives and sit with primary sources and have that direct embodied engagement with them. And I missed that during the pandemic when we were confined to our houses. At the same time as the pandemic put us in lockdown, I was starting a postdoc with the Humanities in a Digital World program here at USC. I was doing this remotely from my apartment in Brooklyn. And so I was thinking, in line with this, the charge, the title of this program, what does it mean to practice the humanities in a digital world? Specifically, how could digital technologies support and enhance key humanistic practices like close reading and close engagement with primary sources? Amy yesterday framed this symposium by talking about the relationship and the distinction between form and content in all of these projects, that we're interested in immersive technologies as providing a new form and that form can shape the content within it. The projects that we've seen so far during this weekend have been largely about content, custom virtual content that is created or curated by subject matter experts. Often these models that we've seen are built manually or they're captured from reality and then refined. And in either case, they take a lot of time and skill and effort and money to get right. The core problem with a content-based approach for me is that this approach is really hard to scale up. It's really hard to put in the hands of people who are untrained. And so Booksnake takes a different approach to using immersive technologies. Instead of being about content, it is about form. So I want to start with a really clear summary of what Booksnake does. Booksnake automatically transforms existing digitized archival materials into life-size virtual objects for interaction in physical space. This is easier to show than to describe, so I'm going to switch views here and take you through a live demo, and then I'm going to come back to the slides and explain how Booksnake does what it does and why it matters. So first we're going to see what this looks like in a web browser. So there's the Library of Congress website here. Could I get a search term for a major American city? Philadelphia. Okay, so let's type in Philadelphia.
You an audience plant?
I'm not.
And from here we can see the 2 million or so items within the Library of Congress. We can scroll through the results here. If we want to filter to maps, we can use the search facets on the left side here. We could look at this map, the Philadelphia of today. This is an existing flat screen image viewer. The touch screen makes the affordances a little different.
Check the bottom one on the wall.
Technology is going to technology, right?
We're all going to be saying that for the rest of our lives. Thank you so much.
Should I pull it out and... Okay, all right. Stay there. So a flat screen image viewer. If we scroll down here, we can see some of the metadata. So this map is 47 by 85 centimeters. How big is that? Can you show me with your hands? Ish. Okay, we have some people who are conversant with the metric system. Very good. We don't get that sense from this image, and if we tap into it, we are constrained by these buttons up here. We're going to jump between these fixed levels of magnification. If I pinch and zoom, I can only go in so far. And then now that I'm here, it's really hard to sort of figure out where I am within this and to try to get back out. And this image viewer is incredible in its way, and I think that we have been blinded to some of the compromises involved in using traditional flat screen image viewers. So now I'm going to take you into Booksnake. This is the library view of Booksnake. This is where we start. And if I go over to the Explore tab here and select the Library of Congress, I'm going to run the same search for Philadelphia. And this is going to look really similar because it is in fact the same material. This is the same web content, the same search, the same Library of Congress website wrapped inside of the Booksnake app. So again, I can filter, for example, by maps here on the left sidebar. I'm going to find this Philadelphia of today map. And now I'm going to go up to this upper right-hand corner here and tap the Add button. And this is going to download this material into my Booksnake library. So I have a note here that it is starting to download the item. I'm going to keep exploring here and take us back to the search results and back again to this initial result. I'm curious about the Oddfellows journal here. And I'm going to add this to my library as well. And this time I'm going to select Go to Library. So this is going to take us out of the Explore tab and back to that main library view. And both of these items have downloaded here already. So Philadelphia of today, this map here, this looks a lot like what we saw on the Library of Congress website. We have all of this metadata down below, this thumbnail above. And this takes us to the core of Booksnake. I'm going to tap this blue button that says View in Your Space. It's going to open up the live camera view and insert this virtual object at life size into augmented reality. And that, unfortunately, doesn't click down. But it's OK for the purposes of the demo here. OK, so first I have these sort of red targeting things. And this is going to transform into a preview of the object. And this transparent preview gives you a sense of the size of the object and where it's going to sit. And if I sort of cast this about the space, we get a sense of how the size will change based on its distance rather from me. And then if I tap it here, it's going to anchor the object to the table. It's going to stay right there. So if I move the camera view up, here all of you are hello, 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 hello. And then if I come back to the object here, it's right where I left it. And from here, I can interact with this object as if I were in a reading room or a museum gallery, treating my device almost like a magnifying glass, almost like a lens. So if I come up close to it here, we can see Philadelphia of today. We can come in here on the river scene. As someone interested in coastal environments, I'm always curious about the boat traffic here. So we can see this is some steam launches here, some sailing ships. And then we'll pull back. So instead of jumping between those fixed levels of magnification, we can move the device, use our bodies to explore. You can also pinch to zoom. You can enlarge the object here in case you want to get it a little larger. And because all of this is built on top of the existing technology stack in Apple devices, as I'm going to talk about more in just a minute, this incorporates things like people occlusion or object occlusion. So I could come up here and point to part of the map. You're getting a little clipping around the hand there, but it's a way of increasing that immersion with an object. We designed Booksnake originally to work with flat objects, and over the last year, we've been working under an NEH grant to extend that support for compound objects. Compound objects have a single catalog record and multiple images associated with them, like books, newspapers, magazines, and so forth. So here's the Oddfellows journal. Again, I'm going to bring it here into my space. And if I swipe, I just get that second page right up, and I can come in here and look at all of these job ads here from 19th century Philadelphia. We have that page turn sound effect there so that you know what's happening as you turn the page. So I'm going to take you back to my slides here. I want to talk a little bit about why Booksnake is possible now, and then take you through the technical pipeline so you understand what's going on under the hood. Booksnake is newly possible because of two recently developed technologies. It connects these two technologies, IIIF, the International Image Interoperability Framework, with RealityKit and ARKit. First, Booksnake uses IIIF to access and download digitized materials from online collections. IIIF is an open web framework. It's developed and administered by a consortium of GLAM institutions, and it helps to make digitized materials interoperable between online collections. It is the most important library technology you've never heard of. IIIF is important because it's the underlying digital infrastructure that we'll use to link Booksnake with different collections. It means that this is more than a project for Library of Congress collections. This is a project for any institution that serves its collections through IIIF, including USC, including UCLA. So that's the first half. Then Booksnake uses RealityKit and ARKit to bring those digitized items into physical space. These are software frameworks that are built into every iPhone and every iPad. They are built in at the operating system level. This is not a separate app that you need to download and install. It's something that is in the device already. Booksnake uses RealityKit to create these custom objects, and then it uses ARKit to manage all of the interactions with physical space. So that work of detecting a surface or doing that people occlusion to mask out my hand. We're building Booksnake for iPhone and iPad first as a research project, as an experiment, as a way of working out how to do this, how to put together this technical pipeline. And as the project moves beyond an experimental stage, we're planning to develop an Android version as well. So here's what that looks like step by step. When a user adds an item to their Booksnake library, Booksnake uses IIIF to retrieve and download the item metadata and images, and next create a custom virtual object. Booksnake creates a blank virtual object that matches the item's physical dimensions and proportions. You can think about this like taking a piece of foam core and cutting it to size. You're left with a rigid blank object. And then Booksnake applies the digital image as a texture. So it takes that JPEG it's downloaded and it wraps it to the surface of the virtual plane. And this creates a custom virtual object that matches the physical original in its size, in its proportions, and in its appearance. And then finally, Booksnake uses ARKit to bring that object into physical space. This can feel like wizardry, especially to people who haven't used immersive technologies before, but it's really a magic trick. And it's a magic trick in two different ways. The first is the process about what's going on inside of Booksnake. Because Booksnake is just doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's downloading information, it's creating a custom object, it's bringing it into physical space. The only things that change are the size of the object and the image that's applied to it. But because the image is what we, the viewer, care about, containing the information that we are interested in, it feels new every time. The second trick is perceptual, about what goes on up here as you're experiencing this. All Booksnake is doing is displaying a digital image on a flat screen. Nothing about this is novel, but it does it in a way that keeps this digital image referenced to physical space, to the physical world. So you end up see if I can get back into the slides here. There we go. Where are we? So you end up looking through your device. The second trick is perceptual. You end up looking through your device at a virtual object in the real world. The important point here is that Booksnake is a content-agnostic viewer for existing digitized cultural heritage materials. I'm using a map as an example here, but you could use Booksnake to view manuscripts, correspondence, photographs, architectural plans, any IIIF compliant digital image. And in that, it brings the exploratory freedom that users already associate with online collections, millions of objects, into viewing those collections in AR. And I want to emphasize what I started the presentation by framing, that this is a different approach. Instead of presenting expert-created or expert-curated virtual content, Booksnake creates a pipeline to leverage augmented reality as a general-purpose tool. This is about the form rather than the content. So my argument with this project is that size matters when it comes to cultural heritage material, and so we've put a lot of work into making sure that Booksnake can consistently display digitized items at their real-world physical dimensions. This is the most difficult part of the project, and so I want to share with you our methods for interpreting dimensional metadata. The underlying issue is that IIIF is a technical framework for sharing information, but it is not a standard for what information needs to be shared. And because of that, every archive approaches metadata, and particularly dimensional metadata, a little differently. For example, the map of Los Angeles on my previous slides, or the map of Philadelphia that we looked at together, that comes from the Library of Congress, which provides dimensional metadata in some item records, but not in the IIIF manifest, which means it's not computer readable. More on how we deal with that in just a second. We're also working with the Huntington Library, which mostly includes dimensional information. It is in the IIIF manifest where available, but that data is given as a text string in the physical description field. Someone has typed out in prose form what the centimeters and inches of the object are, and because of that, it isn't computer readable. And then finally, the David Rumsey map collection. Yes, 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 in the item record, in the manifest, and it is computer readable, and so that collection is a prime candidate for easy inclusion in Booksnake. And because of this challenge, extrapolate this out to the hundreds of archives using IIIF to serve images, I expect that we'll need to adapt Booksnake on an archive-by-archive basis. And so a major research focus is lowering the barrier to making those connections by improving the different ways that we can identify, ingest, and interpret dimensional metadata. So if Library of Congress doesn't provide dimensional metadata, how do we get life-size virtual objects? We use the pixel dimensions of virtual images. And if you know anything about digitization, this probably sounds wildly wrong, because pixel dimensions have no physical reference in the real world. So I want to explain how this works. At any institution, the digitization process involves three pieces of metadata. The first are the item's original physical dimensions. The second is the digitization resolution, and this can vary a lot. It's usually between 300 and 600 ppi, pixels per inch. And then finally, multiplying those together gets you the pixel dimensions, the height and width in pixels. Booksnake needs either a computer-readable version of the physical dimensions of the object, or both the digitization resolution and the pixel dimensions, from which it can work backwards to the physical dimensions. So for the Library of Congress, after a lot of work and troubleshooting, we realized that the Library of Congress follows the Federal Agency Digitization Guidelines Initiative standards, the FADG standards, which specify a target resolution for different item types. If you have a photograph, you want to digitize it at this resolution. If you have a newspaper, you want to digitize it at this resolution. And so we used that information to build a reference table. Again, dimensional metadata not in the item record, but Library of Congress is very good about identifying what kind of an item, both in the record and in the IIIF manifest. So Booksnake goes to that first, looks up the item type, consults the IIIF manifest, looks up the corresponding resolution in this reference table, and uses that to take the pixel dimensions, multiply or divide back in order to get physical dimensions. If you're confused, I don't blame you. As this example suggests, determining an item's physical dimensions is a seemingly simple problem that quickly becomes complicated. And importantly, with Booksnake, all of this is hidden from the user. All of this pipeline about downloading an item's IIIF manifest, about downloading the images, determining the correct physical dimensions, using all of that to create a virtual object, all of that is invisible to the user. In the late 19th century, George Eastman introduced a new kind of camera, the Eastman Kodak. Its slogan was, "You press the button, we do the rest." And these were the early days of photography, when making a photograph was a complicated, expensive, laborious process, typically involving tripods and shadow cloths and volatile, sensitive chemicals and fragile sheets of glass. And because of those material and technical requirements, making a photograph was beyond the reach of most people. The Eastman Kodak changed that. It packaged a strip of film into a camera box, letting you take a picture by pressing a button to trigger the shutter. When you were done, you sent the whole camera into Kodak, they processed it into prints, they sent you back a new camera and your photographs. And what this camera did, it uncoupled the act of capturing an image from the work of making a photographic print. And that separation proved key in making photography cheaper, easier, and more widely accessible. Booksnake does something similar by automating the process of converting digital images into life-size virtual objects. You see an image in an online archive, and then you see it on your table. You press the button, and we do the rest. Stephen yesterday drew an analogy between VR projects and early film, And if we think of the kinds of virtual objects for augmented reality as another kind of media, maybe similar to early photographs and to the process of early photography, then the question I want to pose is, what happens when the cost of producing those virtual objects falls to zero? How will that change how and when and where and why we use virtual objects? How will that change our research, our teaching, and the kind of learning that goes on in our classrooms? I don't know yet, but I think we're getting an early preview from some of the projects involving photogrammetry for their ability to quickly and easily make 3D objects captured from life. Booksnake is a collaborative and multidisciplinary project. It exists thanks to the work and the creativity of these people. I particularly want to recognize the developers, Christy, Henry, Michael, and Zach, all of them USC students, who all regularly do the impossible for a lead who does not have their technical skills or abilities. And I want to thank Curtis and Amy and Peter, who isn't here, who've believed in this project since I pitched it when I started as a postdoc 3 years ago. And finally, why this matters. I want to close with some questions about interface from Joanna Drecker, a colleague of our UCLA colleagues. Nearly 10 years ago now, she asked, what kind of interface exists after the screen goes away? A handheld device that conjures the data world into view? I touch the surface of my desk and it opens to the library of the world? My walls are display points, capable of offering the inventory of masterworks from the world's museums and collections into view? These questions point towards spatial interfaces that integrate the physical with the digital, and this is what Booksnake is building towards. Booksnake is a way to virtualize the reading room experience, a way to virtualize the museum experience, and thereby democratize it, making embodied interaction with cultural heritage materials more accessible to more people in more places. In short, Booksnake mobilizes the unique capabilities of phones and tablets towards a spatial interface for humanities research, one that is radically new, but that feels deeply familiar. We'll be launching Booksnake as a free public beta next month, but everyone here can download it starting today. You can scan the QR code here. You can go to booksnake.app/beta to download it to your own iPhone or iPad. Booksnake will launch with access to Library of Congress collections, with more archives on the way, and as part of our NEH grant, all of the source code for this will be available on GitHub. And we'll have information about the download link set up at the demo stations as well. So again, we're building Booksnake to enable digital accessibility and to connect more people with primary sources. I'm so excited to talk about all of this with you. Thank you so much, and I look forward to our conversation.
So before we open up to questions, we're going to have a comments from Steve Wittek, who is an associate professor of English at Carnegie Mellon and who presented to us yesterday on his article.
Thank you very much. More of this sort of thing is my one-sentence summary of my review here. I'm very, very impressed for a number of reasons, and I've got a few questions, but I want to start off by just taking note of some of the things that I really like and appreciate about this project. The first, I appreciate sort of the spirit behind the project. It reminds me of the good old idealism of the earlier days of digital humanity, where people were really motivated by an ethic of open access, as you said in your closing comments, democratizing information, making scholarly resources available to people who wouldn't otherwise have access. I think that is a very, very noble goal, and you're obviously want to do this very, very badly, or very, very committed to that ethic, and I really, really appreciate that. Another thing I really appreciate about the project is just the incredible amount of technical ingenuity that has gone into this. Sean shared with me a longer version of this presentation, sort of an article that's being prepared for Digital Humanities Quarterly, I think.
That's right.
And the How I Made It story of this project is, well, to a certain sort of mind anyway, really, really thrilling. It was a real page turner, just and we got a very condensed version of it here for the presentation. But It is hacks on top of hacks,
Yeah.
and you've got to jump on one foot and go around to the side of the house and sneak in through the back door, and just all the ingenuity. It's really, really impressive. And really deserving of commendation on that point as well. Another thing I really like about the project is, and you got to this in your closing comments as well, just for, on the more theoretical side, people just kind of thinking about new media and AR and VR. There is a real inherent theoretical provocation built into the DNA of this project, challenging people to rethink something we very, very often take for granted, and that's the interface and the way that we interact with digital materials. It did not have to be this way. There's actually lots of possibilities that interacting with digital resources could have been different in a lot of ways. What we have now, the two-dimensional interface that we just very rarely even really think too deeply about, is in a lot of ways a vestige of a bygone era, like the QWERTY keyboard or something like that. So Sean's been doing a lot of thinking, I think, which strikes me as very, very sort of valuable theoretical thinking alongside people like Joanna Drucker and Haraway, too, which was quoted quite often in the piece. So I really appreciated that. The interface could be different. Then the fourth point, the thing I like is I think there's great potential here pedagogically. So the other night at dinner, I was talking to Sean. I can imagine using this in my own classes, in my Shakespeare classes, whenever I teach plays like Lear or Hamlet, where there are multiple versions of a single play. You've got the little small cordial versions and then the big deluxe folio versions. And each of those different editions are different. And they're different not only in terms of content, but they look different. A cordo was less expensive, it's much smaller, it's portable. And when you're trying to teach people about print culture of early modernity, and get them excited about it and understand how people are thinking about and using these texts, what I usually do is take people to special collections and show them, here's a cordo, here's a folio. This is why the difference is important to how scholars think about these plays. Of course, not every class can go to a special collection section of a library, but everybody has a phone, pretty much, or at least in my university, I think it's phone. There's no scarcity of phones, generally speaking. So you could do a unit like that just in the classroom very easily with something like this, where you are comparing those different sorts of texts, where size and sort of seeing the original really, really does matter. So those are all the things I like about it. I have some questions for you as well.
Please.
I'm wondering, it seems to me, in terms of, when I think about use scenarios, it seems to me potential for educational uses is greater than scholarly uses. I can imagine myself using this in the classroom. I do a lot of work in archives too. It's very, very rare that I think I would want to use something like this to just sort of consult an old book. And it seems to me as the project evolves, like right now, you can anticipate scholarly uses, you can anticipate pedagogical uses. It seems to me at some point, though, those paths are likely to diverge as you develop and refine the project. And so I'm wondering, is there, maybe a student edition Booksnake and a scholar edition Booksnake? So that's my main question for you, is because that those two things are going to diverge. With the exception too, I'm just glad that you demoed maps here. The one scholarly, I don't work with maps myself very much, but the one scholarly use where I can really see people wanting something like this is like a big map that's difficult to access. For books, I'm not so sure. It seems that's a little bit to the corner of what scholars are usually going to commercial collections. So, but why don't we do that question?
Sure. Yeah, it's a very good question. We've done some user testing so far, both individually and in classroom settings, to see how people use this and what they want out of it. Part of the reason that we're releasing it as a public beta at this point is to see where people take it next and what affordances they find particularly valuable, what materials they find it most valuable to use with, and those responses and that feedback will inform the future development pathways and what the app looks like. I think there's a lot of power in offering one app for all audiences, but I recognize also that different audiences have different goals and different questions. And so to the extent possible at this point, and this might change, my goal is to incorporate as many of those different use cases into a set of customizable preferences within the app. So an example of this might be if you're using Booksnake in an institutional context, maybe you have an iPad set up as part of a museum exhibit, and you know that the person using it is going to be different every time. There's a tutorial pop-up that appears the first time someone launches Booksnake that tells you very briefly how to use it. You aim it at a flat surface, you tap the screen, you move to explore. Aim, tap, explore. And so for example, I could see building a preference switch to run that every time someone starts an AR session, every time they go into that AR space, instead of just the first time for the first user. I'm thinking if there are other things that I want to say in response to your question. I don't think that there are at this point.
I'll ask one more question and then I'll turn it over.
Perfect.
Over now. Okay, I'm wondering, I'm asking this because I suspect this is something you've probably given a lot of thought to, especially given your commitment to open access and democratization of information and all that. One thing about Booksnake is it's going to work on iPhones and apps, so you're locked into the hermetically sealed Apple universe and are putting your chips down there, which is great in some ways. That means it's probably going to work. Actually, and by the way, this works much, much better, just based on what I saw in the demo, than that Google Arts and Culture app. It's much more usable. But so I'm just sort of wondering, how you must be of two minds to a certain extent about sort of signing your life away to the proprietary prison of Apple. But so I just invite you to talk a little bit about the trade-offs.
Sure.
I imagine are there.
Absolutely, yeah. The channels by which this reaches an audience is a really important question. This is a trade-off that we all face in building for hardware and software, so building for Unity or building for Oculus or Quest. In the mobile landscape in the United States, there is a duopoly between Apple and Android. There's a slight majority for iOS and iPadOS users in the US over Android. That's not true worldwide. And there are technical and social considerations that informed why we're starting with iOS. The technical considerations are that AR development is really hard. It's really messy because you're continually ingesting real-time data about the world and trying to keep virtual objects referenced against that. And the technology stack available on Apple devices, both the hardware and the software, is much better and is much more refined and better documented and more robust than on the Android side, for a couple of reasons that I could go into in more detail if people are curious. So it was easier to do an experimental project with something like this. We looked into WebXR, which is a cross-platform web framework for extended reality, and at the time that the project was starting 3 years ago, WebXR wasn't stable. It's now in beta. It has only recently, within the last couple of months, been announced that it will be available on Apple devices, so that cross-platform promise is being fulfilled. But even in a web setting, there are things that you can't do that you can do when it's a native app, including downloading and storing things for offline use, and particularly the way that we do compound objects, the way that we display and create a 400-page book, we can do very easily in a native app in a way that would be more difficult to do with a web-based service. And then the social considerations as well. iPhone and iOS, that's where our audience is. An investment bank on a recent annual survey of US teenagers, some of you may have seen this, 87% of US teenagers own an iPhone. That's incredible. And if this is going to be a classroom product, that is already getting us most of the people in any given hypothetical classroom. That also raises important equity questions about that remaining 13%, how we reach them, and how we make this a technology that is accessible to everybody rather than a technology that is exclusionary and perpetuates the digital divide. And that's why one of the major goals for where we go next is adapting this for Android.
If I could trade Oculus for Apple, I'd do it in a second.
There's that too, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Questions? Joe?
I really like your theoretical basis, and from my perspective, you're relying on Gibsonian affordances and 4E cognition. But I want to ask you about the 4P and the 4T cognition for extending my cognition. So if somebody wants to take notes on that map, or do you think about anything in the future of providing tools to let them do some kind of annotation or extending their thinking for their scholarship?
Yeah, annotations is a really good question. This is something people have been asking about since the project started. We're not there yet. I think that's another big grant. That's another 1.5 years of development. Annotations are really interesting to me because if we pull back, the project as a whole is both an interface project and it's a data management project. How do you use augmented reality as a novel interface for interacting with existing digitized archival material? And then how do you download and keep organized all of the digital assets, the metadata, the images that go into composing that material? And annotations recapitulate that problem. How do you use the AR interface in a way that is intuitive and engaging and that you can work with the device rather than against it to add contextual information or display and receive contextual information on top of a virtual object? And then the data management side, how do you keep that organized? What happens if you're sharing objects between libraries and you share an object that already has someone else's annotations on it? Is this an open access thing where anybody can see these annotations? How do you deal with content moderation? So there are a lot of really interesting and challenging questions related to annotation that I am excited to head towards if I have funding to do so in the future. Lisa?
2 questions. The first is on image content. So as someone that looks at lots of archival pictures of the Columbian Exposition online, often I can zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in on the viewer for the archive. But when I request a download, it's 1,000 pixels by 787 pixels.
Yeah.
So, do you get access to that high resolution? Or are you locked in? So that's the first question. Second question, could you talk a little bit more about the name?
I'd love to. I'll answer the second question first. It's more fun. Those of you who are historians in the room or who've done archival research before, you know what a Booksnake is. A Booksnake is a weighted piece of string that we use to keep fragile materials in place. So to keep a book open or to keep a letter unfolded. And when I was starting this project, I knew it needed to have a name that expressed what it did. And in the same way that physical Booksnakes hold physical objects in place so that we can look at them, Booksnake the app holds virtual objects in place so that you can look at them. And this project really comes out of my love for archival research. This is a project that I want to enhance the way people do archival research, and so it builds on that tradition as well. To your other question about the kinds of images that we have access to, there are 2 sides to this. There's a technical side and there's a policy side. The technical side is that Booksnake is limited to the highest resolution image that the archive makes available. Garbage in, garbage out. And if the archive is serving a small image, the virtual object that Booksnake creates will be pixelated and blocky. And that leads me to the second side of this, the policy question, and that exact scenario that you've experienced where an archive makes available a higher resolution image for exploration and discovery on their own website than they make available for download. I would want to be in conversation with the people who are running that digital collection about how they can and whether they're willing to offer higher resolution images to Booksnake so that Booksnake can do what it does. This is, again, a challenge on an archive-by-archive basis. Mike?
I guess 2 questions and then a suggestion. One, is there going to be a way, or is there already a way that you can manually add information to, say, maps, documents, things that you have already found. I have a lot of material from, say, the Bermuda Archive. It's uncatalogued, but I have high-resolution digital copies. I would love to access my own material in this form. So, yeah, can you add those dimensions? Second, a lot, when you were showing this use case, a lot of my student work is dealing with HiDW's America's Historical Newspapers. And they're behind a paywall, but you can download things. Are they compliant with IIIF? Is that a thing you can tap into? And then the third thing that jumped out is turning things vertical. Like, I could also imagine you could imagine instead of this, you could be on the wall, you could put a painting, or you could put a map, and then say, look at, a convenient plane. So this also, I think, would work for art pieces. Art, of course, Booksnake doesn't work.
It doesn't translate in the same way. Yeah.
I think you don't just have to have tables.
Yeah, so to the last question first, yes, Booksnake supports vertical anchors, as they're known in augmented reality. You're welcome to come and try that out at the demo stations. The physical environment here didn't really offer me an easy vertical anchor, which is why I showed it on tables. To your first question about whether there's a way for you to add your own material, you're welcome to set up your own private IIIF compliant server and serve stuff to yourself. There's a way to do it. It's not easy at this point. The low-hanging fruit for this project is going out and connecting to other archives like David Rumsey that are serving high-quality images and high-quality metadata, and that's how we make this the most useful to the most number of people fastest. But I'm also listening to what people want from this, and I can see a future in which there is a way to connect Booksnake with something like Omeka or something like Scalar as a way of bringing IIIF compliant resources into your own version of Booksnake. And then your middle question about HiDW's, yeah. I don't believe HiDW's is IIIF compliant. I don't know for sure. There are affordances within the IIIF APIs for authentication protocols so that you can access IIIF compliant resources that are authentication restricted to people within your institution, for example. But again, we're listening, and if linking Booksnake to HiDW's is important to enough people, that's going to inform our development priorities, and I would hope that HiDW's would be receptive to that kind of a conversation. I think that we're at time here.
We're at time.
Okay. Thank you all so much.